My presentation is based around the tennis burnout. Is the lengthy tennis schedule affecting players and the media world? So why this topic? This is an issue that I have followed closely as I've watched the tennis season progress over the last 12 months. Tennis is a sport close to my heart, having watched it regularly for several years and played it myself at my local tennis club. Understanding the physicality levels necessary to be able to play on a regular basis. The issue surrounding the tennis burnout is a subjective and controversial topic. The tennis calendar consists of several events labelled mandatory. These consist of Masters 1000 tournaments and a select number of ATP 500 and ATP 250 events. These are also reflected on the AWTA side as well. The 1000 events are the level below the Grand Slam titles and offer 1,000 points to the winner to go towards the world rankings. Tennis players who are at a certain point in the rankings are then required to compete in these events, unless injured or unavailable, under an agreement between the player and the men's ATP and women's WTA organisations. 500 and 250 events offer 500 and 250 points for the winner, and are the two levels below the 1000 tournaments. 500 events are more mandatory than 250 events, as there are more tournaments of the latter than the former. I chose this topic because I find it relevant to not just the players, but also the sports industry. People forget that media and TV crew also have the same requirements, if not more, than the professional athletes, and must do as much travelling, even if they don't have the burden of having to use physical strength. In the world of tennis athletes, over the past year, high-profile players such as men's number 1 Carlos Alcaraz and women's number 2 Iga Swiatek, as well as tennis legend and current world number 4 Novak Djokovic, have hit out at the argument. So the current calendar and media requirements. In the 2025 recent men's ATP tennis season, there were 59 individual events across 27 countries and 6 of the 7 continents, not including the ATP Finals, which was a top 8 ranked cap tournament. In the recent 2025 women's WTA tennis season, there were 52 different individual events across 24 countries and also 6 of the 7 continents. And this was also not including the WTA Finals, which was also, like the men, a top 8 ranked cap tournament. Men's year-end number 1, Carlos Alcaraz, commented earlier in the season, stating, "Probably they are going to kill us in some way." But not only are the players who are paid more than enough to play in these events required to travel to as many of these tournaments, but also the media. There are multiple media organisations who cover the sport across TV, radio and written news. As an example, Sky Sports signed a big deal at the start of 2024 to show every ATP and WTA 1000, 500 and 250 event, as well as the US Open and the tour's respective finals, and team events such as the United Cup. A total of 58 streamed tournaments on the ATP Tour and 51 on the WTA side. Sky Sports have commentators, cameramen, technical staff, presenters, amongst other members of the broadcasting team who must travel to these countries and cover the events. A reduction in tennis would not only reduce the workload of media organisations, but make the integrity of winning a tournament even greater, something that a couple of players have mentioned, having won a title last year, but had to travel to another country and play at a different event the day after. Of course, there are also benefits of too much tennis and media travelling. It can help the lower ranked players, as more tournaments will allow for more chances for these players to enter the main draw or qualifying of the event and win more points than they would on the ATP Challenger Tour, the step below the main tour. It also gives the players the opportunity to get ready for slams, having more tournament practice on the specific court surface, whether it's grass, clay, or the more used hard courts in America. More tennis on each surface sets players up better for the conditions in the biggest events. An economic factor sees it allow countries to host and gain vital exposure from TV and media coverage of events in their land, using it to invite tourists to their tennis tournament. It also allows the media personnel the chance to live the dream and travel the world, expanding their knowledge palette of different cultures and where these players call home. Just like the players, the media need their own source of income, and although it sounds selfish, the more tournaments that are played around the world, the more opportunities that are brought up and jobs for aspiring journalists, whether it's TV crew, cameramen, presenters, directors, written news articles, or radio journalism. These are factors that are used to help aspiring journalists make income. The disadvantages of too much travelling and tennis. An issue with the number of tennis events in the calendar can and has affected the integrity of some tournaments as well. The reason the Grand Slams are so prestigious is because of how hard they are to win, just being 4 of them. But with the 1,500 and 250 events, becomes a less of a necessity to win a tournament once an opportunity arises due to the magnitude of how many events there are. How long can players sustain their ability and potential to perform at the highest level with all the tournaments as well? Well, as the events become more demanding and tiresome, a player's legs and career longevity, without the correct people around them, can lead to an early retirement due to struggles with continuously competing. These events are being played every week and even before slams. In honesty, there is no need for players to have to play a week before a slam, with many players hitting out at that point, and that a week off beforehand may make the tournament more competitive. These players win a tournament and need to travel to another in a different country the day after. Is that sustainable? It's open for debate. The tennis calendar in 2025 started in the final week of December and ended in the last week of November with the Davis Cup finals. Many players will have just 3 weeks of no tennis for the whole year, making it harder for them to spend time at home and with the family. This also applies to the media. These players have too many requirements on their shoulders as well. For an example, a week before a slam, a player may have to play 5 matches in a 250 event and play an additional 7 if they want to win the slam afterwards. That's not even taking into requirement potential qualifying events as well. That's 17 matches plus in just 3 weeks. Of course, there are also political and economic factors that need to be taken into account as well. Countries/cities may not want the tournament to be discontinued in their country, creating an issue for the respective tennis associations and potentially affecting the relationship between the tours and the country going forward. A lack of support from fellow players will make it hard for players to force the hand of governing bodies as well and change their minds on the running of the tennis year. No turn-up. If the tennis schedule gets too much for some injured players, or a potential of them not turning up for an event out of protest will affect the country the event will be held in financially. No fans will want to turn up if they aren't guaranteed what they were promised pre-tournament. The 2 respective tours also have to be careful that the players don't ask for too much. A big reduction in events could lead to the unemployment for people in the media and tournament staff due to events being discontinued, and could affect the popularity of the sport if less countries are hosting these events. One for and against the argument, too much tennis could be bad for the sport, as people may become disinterested due to the continuous commitment needed to keep up with every event, while too little tennis will mean less coverage of the events across the globe on TV, which will mean less fans will be created if some countries don't hold events. One final point is that the players' voices may not be enough. At the end of the day, it's the ATP and WTA that hold all the cards and control over the running of their own tours, and players may not always, unless in extreme circumstances, get what they want. The media coverage on this topic is vast, with many players quoted in articles complaining about the current state of the schedule. In a piece on the far left by the Daily Express, it pursued a story which included this quote from men's number 1 Carlos Alcaraz: "We don't have the chance to have a week just to prepare well for the tournaments or what we have in the season ahead." A second article from the First Serve delved into why players are being ignored by tournament directors, and the article included several quotes from high-level players giving their opinion on the issue. Of course, as everyone knows, There will always be people against a topic of conversation, and at the start of last month, a few sources quoted British female number one Emma Raducanu stating, "We only have to play like 5 matches a year," which caused a big disagreement online. As we delve into 3 articles on the topic, the first, written by the BBC, shares a single perspective on the tennis calendar from a former women's world number one. This article is of most relevance to all 3, as it was released just over 5 months ago. The article is used to not just share the views of Swiatek, but also talk on the retirements from matches certain players had to make at last year's Asian Tennis Swing, and how impactful the mandatory 1000 events are. To offer up a sympathetic perspective, the writer comments on 24 Grand Slam champion Novak Djokovic's stance on cutting back on the matches he's playing in, due to the severity of games he would have to play before retirement from the sport, if he was to play week in, week out, like most have to. This second article, written by The Express, shares the viewpoints of 2 different players on different tours in one. The first paragraph is one I like. The way he states that Alcaraz has joined the likes of certain players tells a new reader to the topic that this is an issue that is already ongoing amongst the top professionals. Despite the story being fairly compact, the use of quotes shares a rare but in-the-know factor of how a tennis player's life and tennis is impacted by multiple tournaments week in, week out. At the end of the article, it offers a human sympathy element, with the quote from Sabalenka which Alcaraz backed up, stating, "At some point, it's going to hurt, it's going to get you." A powerful, almost question-like way to start the final paragraph of the article. The final article, also written by The Express, showcases a recent element to the story as the schedule crisis came mostly to light in 2025. The use of player quotes backs up the evidence, and the way the writer uses an against viewpoint, with the ATP president voicing his opinions on the players' opinions. The written article includes relevant information to back up the points that are being pursued in the depths of the story, while examples of player retirements are used by the writer as evidence as to why the schedule may need a change. The article uses an expert opinion on the topic, with Gaudenzi's interpretation of the schedule, which offers more trustworthy and reliable journalism to the overall look of the story. Of all 3, this is definitely my favourite article, as it not just uses the for element in the debate, but also the against party sharing their thoughts on the schedule as well. There are many fan opinions on the subject scattered across the internet. A post from TNT Sports on X highlighted the criticism of Iga Swiatek over her overwhelming tennis schedule and said that the stars of the sport play too many matches. Most fans agreed with her, with one person stating a tournament starts somewhere but the final of a previous one ended a day before. Rest, fly, sleep, practice, media obligations, and they are being punished because they don't play a number of tournaments there. Another fan said, "She is right, especially the rule about 6 WTA 500 events is crazy. She goes deep in every tournament and makes it impossible for her to fulfill these requirements. She's being punished for being too good." Another tweet saw tennis journalist Jose Morgado tweet about Saudi Arabia to receive a 10th ATP Masters 1000 event starting in 2028. This received backlash from fans online, with one person stating, "Players whining every single day that the calendar is too long. There are too many events, too many mandatories, too much travel. Let's add another mandatory 1000. Tennis is amazing." Another fan said, 10th ATP 1000 at the time when players are complaining about an overly busy schedule. That is insane. There are also many fan opinions against the topic as well. A tweet on X from the Tennis Letter said that Carlos Alcaraz says there are too many mandatory tournaments. I agree with Iga. I think that the schedule is really tight. They have to do something with the schedule. I think there is too many mandatory tournaments, too many in a row. Fans took to social media to reply to this X post, with one person stating, I love watching him play, but it's hard to really feel much sympathy for players complaining about the schedule when they're consistently agreeing to play exhibitions. How does he think he gets paid? Another fan commented. So, in conclusion, overall we have found that the tennis schedule is deemed unplayable by many tennis professionals. But does that give them the right to demand things that are out of their control? Will future injuries and retirements force the hand of the respective tennis tours and demand urgent change to the schedule?